Barlow. She's our chair in Ottawa, and just an incredible human being. And our focus is on social justice, environment, First Nations issues, those kinds of things. And we try to deal with different concerns that we have, and one of them is globalization, the things that are going on here. You may recall a few years ago NAFTA, when NAFTA was signed, that cost Canada about 550,000 good-paying jobs. And now we've got a new issue to deal with. It's called CETA, C-E-T-A, Comprehensive Economic Treaty Agreement between Canada and the U.S. And the discouraging thing is that our governments choose to negotiate that behind closed doors. They are excluding the public from any decision making. Before I wanted to go through the 10 points of why we should reject CETA, just wanted to read you a couple of things. I've been inspired by people like Howard Zinn. If you haven't read any of Howard Zinn's books, you should. He's an amazing historian, truth to power, and he gives a perspective that very few other historians do. But anyway, one of the things that Howard Zinn said in a YouTube lecture that he gave that I saw last night, and I jotted it down because it so implies to what we're dealing with here when we look at the powers above and so forth. We know that right now the power is found in those towers, and this is what Howard Zinn said a number of years ago before his passing away. The power of the people on top depends on the obedience of the people below. When people stop obeying, they, meaning the ones on top, have no power. And this is what you are doing, and this is what all of the other Occupy groups across North America are doing. And did you notice these people are starting to get nervous? They're starting to come in and talk to you and subtly start to intimidate and so forth in the hopes that you'll walk away. I think that we've learned that that's not going to happen. There have been some incredibly violent actions that have happened. You've probably heard of the most recent one in Oakland, California, where at 5 o'clock in the morning, police descended very unexpectedly in a very intimidating way, and they started evacuating people in Oakland, and they arrested anywhere between 50 and 100 people. I was just jotting some places where violence has taken place, and the thing that Occupy has done and has really worked hard on to be non-violent, but to engage in civil disobedience. But the non-violence is a difficult issue, and the powers are very confused about what to do. There are places like Denver, Chicago, Atlanta, and Oakland where there have been violence perpetrated by the police. People have been arrested. As a matter of fact, I was reading in Oakland, one of the occupied people was a fellow by the name of Scott Olson. Has anybody heard of him?
Yeah.
Scott Olson was a vet from the Iraqi tragedy that happened. He was a soldier. He was actually participating with the occupied people. He was actually struck in the face with a projectile from the police, and he was in critical condition. I just read this afternoon that fortunately for him, he's now moved up to in fair condition. But this was created because of the unfairness and the growing disparity between the haves, between the top 1% and the bottom 99%. So getting back to CETA, the Comprehensive Economic Treaty Agreement, negotiations started about 2 years ago. And what makes this even a more destructive free trade agreement is that not only does it include the powers that the federal government has in terms of trade, but it comes right down to the municipal level. And the people in there, in those offices, haven't been involved in any of the negotiations. We had a meeting with them last June, with the mayor's chief executive, and they weren't aware of the extent to which this negotiation was going on. And we asked them, how many other groups has the federal or provincial government approached you to be involved in negotiations if you're involved? And they said no. And believe it or not, the Council of Canadians was the very first group to approach the city, the elected people here, and say, hey, we've got a problem here. And we know that, you know, I've talked with Brian Pincott, and he's really deeply concerned about it. And I know that Brian comes into this area quite often, and hats off to him for doing that. I think he deserves a lot of credit. At any rate, Chelsea's been really kind to become involved in Readers Theatre. And being a teacher all my life, I used to do theatre, Readers Theatre with my students, and they really enjoyed it, but it was a good way of conveying messages. So what we're going to do is just do a Readers Theatre about why CETA is bad for Canada, and then I'll have a few other words and then take any questions if you have any.